The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Monday, the 2nd of June, 2025. We have a packed show for you today. In a minute, I'm going to be bringing on Brian Hooker, our Chief Scientific Officer, to talk about the COVID, what's going on with the COVID shots. Then we're going to have Tia Severino on to talk about our big event on Friday, the Simpsonwood. Then I've got Ginger Taylor coming on, and you're going to want to listen to this. This is Vaccines Can and Do Cause Autism. No question. So she'll be talking about that. And then Mothers to Be section with Isabella Yon, and she will be having Theo Farmer on, and they're going to be talking about the importance of vitamin C in pregnancy. And then we have our story to follow. So let's get straight on with it. Waste no time. Let's bring on Brian Hooker. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Polly. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for getting up so early to talk about this. It's really important.
It is really important, and I am so heartened regarding the rescinding the requirement for the CDC recommendation for the vaccine for kids and for pregnant women. It's very exciting that they did that. There's obviously some pushback. The pushback came specifically through an article from Trib Live, and there's been pushback from other individuals. So this article says, new COVID vaccine guidance pits and in quotes common sense versus science and data. And it's really, really unfortunate. The Trib Live article quotes a doctor from Harvard who had recently been pregnant. I think her name is Sierra Madad. And she says that there's lower risk for ICU admission, preterm birth, and stillbirth. None of that's really true. I went back to the article that she is citing from the CDC and looked at what that article really said. Well, first of all, it was on 1,000 pregnant women who ended up having live births and the outcomes for those live births. And I think only about 178 of those 1,000 were vaccinated. So there was nothing that they could determine that had any type of statistical significance. The only thing that stood out was that there were 8 deaths among the vaccinated pregnant women, 8 deaths among their offspring or their infants. And no deaths in the vaccinated women. Well, these deaths were due to COVID-19, and you can see hospital protocols all over this. We know that from what we saw on the CHD bus, that if their vaccination status was known and they were unvaccinated, they were treated differently. They were put on mechanical ventilation, and that's how these babies died. They went into NICU, they were put on mechanical ventilation, and they died. The rest of the information is inconclusive. There was no significant difference in NICU admissions. There was no significant difference in the outcomes of the children. And there was also a when they looked at the unvaccinated, they looked at a category where they lumped unvaccinated and unknown. So they really did not know the vaccination status for many of these infants that were born to pregnant women who presumably got the COVID vaccine or presumably didn't get the COVID vaccine.
Brian, how dangerous is the COVID vaccine? The reason I ask you is I know our viewers know the dangers. But there's a lot of young mum in the mummies groups, and they watch news. They see when they say RFK Jr. is crazy, he's going to kill these babies, and these pregnant mothers are going to die, all of this kind of nonsense. Can you explain to the people so that we can clip this and send it to those young mums how dangerous these shots are for pregnant women and for children, and actually for everyone, but let's just stick with that for now.
They're extremely dangerous for pregnant women. Miscarriage rates that have been reported on VAERS for the COVID-19 shot eclipse all miscarriage rates for all of the vaccines combined over the 35-year history of VAERS. And so, it's just insane that they would continue to recommend and that anybody would recommend this particular shot, especially during pregnancy. Even the CDC's own report, Dr. Haddad, this report that she cites shows that adverse events and significant events were much higher in the infants that got COVID vaccines, 30% versus 23%, and those that weren't exposed to COVID vaccines in pregnancy. Also, there was a higher risk of cardiac adverse events, which is, so predictable because of myocarditis and pericarditis. So these infants already that were vaccinated were showing signs of cardiac adverse events. And then the last one was neurological adverse events. And so the infants in this study, again, exposed in utero to the COVID-19 vaccine, had a 3 times higher incidence of neurological events over those children who were either unvaccinated or their vaccination status was unknown during the prenatal period. So it's a huge, huge risk with, all downside, no upside.
Now, Brian, do we think, and obviously we don't know this, but obviously all of our viewers want these shots taken right off the market, no matter what age you are. So what's the next step? Do we know anything? I mean, are we going to get them taken off?
That is my hope, that they're taken off the market. I know that looking at the MAHA folks that are in HHS right now, and, most importantly, Secretary Kennedy, there's only certain things that he can do at a time. And to affect a class 1 recall is really a big deal in the FDA, but that's what they need to do. And I think that we need to keep the pressure up on HHS every day. Just because HHS makes an action doesn't mean that's as far as they're going to go. And we want to give them the pressure and the impetus to do that, to take those vaccines off the market, most notably for pregnant women and children, regardless of their health status.
I know also parents, I know this is hard, but we've got to educate those parents who don't know about children's health defense and stuff. But there is this concern that Bobby mentioned the word healthy pregnant women, healthy babies. And that's, of course, freaking everyone out, including myself, to be honest. So why did he do that? Do you know?
I think that that's just sort of the step that you take first. Looking historically, the recommendations that Burback has made, the recommendations that ACIP has made, usually if something were to be withdrawn or something were to be considered first, they always consider the vaccine first for people who are immunocompromised and have other confounding conditions, and then then later they give it to the general population. So rewinding backwards, the first recommendation would be for healthy pregnant women. Then the second recommendation, which I hope is coming soon, is to exclude it for all pregnant women. We do need a total recall for this vaccine.
Yeah, we do, because honestly, let's be honest, the people that go down hardest are often the ones that are sick, if you like, are not healthy, like my son on antibiotics and all of that kind of stuff with, ear infections and stuff. So again, just a warning to everybody out there, this really is not a good vaccine or shot or whatever for anyone.
No, and if you're in that situation where somebody's asking you to get a COVID vaccine, regardless of what the CDC recommendation is, bodily autonomy is so important. So if they say, the CDC has recommended many, many things that are not good to put in your body. So therefore, bodily autonomy is your business, and make the best choice for you. This is not a shot that I would ever recommend.
No, and stay away from pediatricians. That's not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defence, but it's certainly the views of Polly Tommy. Brian Hooker, thank you for being on this morning so early to update us on that. We truly appreciate you.
Great. Thanks so much, Polly. You have a great day.
All right. Thank you too. All right. Let's bring on Tia Severino. Good morning.
Good morning, Polly. So lovely to see you.
It is. Now, listen, everybody, there's been a lot of work, months of work going on behind what's going to happen on CHD TV on Friday. Tia, take it away and tell us all about it, please, because Tia is the organization behind it.
Well, I mean, I couldn't have done it without the hard work of CHD TV's team and the incredible folks that have come on. I have to mention right off the bat that Lynn Redwood has been integral in helping to gather the information, as she was right there in the thick of it when it happened. So the autism cover-up, Simpsonwood 25 years of fraud and corruption, is, let's call it an online symposium. So on Friday, starting at 10 o'clock, and I think there's about 10 hours worth of content. So mark your calendars, 10 a.m. until about 8 a.m. And if you can't watch the whole thing live, don't worry at all, because all of the interviews are going to be up on the main page, on the landing page. This is free. It's absolutely free to watch. You just have to register so that we can send you the reminders to tune in, but it is free to watch. And you want to share this widely, because this is going to be a massive event, hopefully a big eye opener for a lot of people who don't know what happened at Simpson. When we say Simpsonwood may not even understand what we're talking about, and it should be like Watergate. It is a bigger scandal impacting way more lives. So we are going to pull back the curtain on how the CDC and pharma covered up vaccine autism links, how this continues to today. And so just to roll the clock back here, Simpsonwood, we refer to Simpsonwood as the scientific review of vaccine safety data link meeting that was held by top CDC officials at a secluded retreat in Norcross, Georgia, called Simpsonwood. This was held off campus, I think, because they were trying to avoid having record of it for FOIA requests. Well, we don't know, but minutes were transcribed from this meeting, and we have those now, thanks to Safe Minds and Lynn Redwood, Sally Bernard, and all their hard work. It wouldn't be a scandal if it weren't for the fact that it wasn't just the CDC that was meeting there. They invited the heads of pharmaceutical companies to come, and Thomas Verstraeten had been looking at the thimerosal in vaccines, and the realization was made, oh my God, they never even added up. I think they said it was the 9th grade algebra required to add up the cumulative amount of mercury. And so this study and the data that was being presented at Simpsonwood showed a statistically significant link between thimerosal containing vaccines and autism. And instead of sounding the alarm, they closed the ranks, rewrote the science to protect the vaccine program, not the children. Some of the things that were being said in this meeting were things like, you can play with it all you want. It is linear. It is statistically significant, speaking about the amount of mercury and how that related to, and by the way, the vaccine safety data link is a massive amount of data they were looking at from some large HMO, sorry. So they were really getting a lot of good data. Now, Polly, this was not an anomaly. This was not something that happened in a vacuum. It wasn't a one-off. This is their playbook. And that is why it is so important, why we're doing this event, because people need to understand this is a case study in the CDC pharma playbook. suppress the science, control the narrative, blame the parents, deny liability. We've seen this exact pattern play out again and again with other vaccine injuries, adverse events, and censorship of dissenting experts. So I think we have a little clip that we can show from one of our interviews from Andy Wakefield. So
Certainly the mainstream
Andrew
media
Wakefield.
absolutely is. And it's deception on the part of the CDC. It was twisted, it was distorted in a way that really led to millions of American children being exposed to the risk of permanent, serious neurological injury. My interest at that time was pattern of exposure. For example, the age of exposure. Was age of exposure to MMR a risk? The younger you got it, the greater the risk of an abnormal reaction. Now, why would we put that forward? Well, we know that with natural measles, if you get it under 1, then the risk of having a bad outcome is much greater than if you get it when your immune system is more mature over the age of 1. And so I said we believe it's age of exposure. And so the CDC went away and tested that hypothesis. And this is, my encouragement. This is what I wanted. I say beware of what you wish for, because they tested the hypothesis. They found it to be absolutely true, absolutely right. And they decided to cover that up, bury the data, change the data, publish a paper which said completely the opposite, exonerating MMR vaccine, and lie to the American public, physicians, scientists, the government for 14 years, until William Thompson came forward and said, I can no longer live with this. Here is the real data. Here are the results.
All right, Tia, here's what I think about this. I think everybody needs to watch this. You could just have it on in your head. Take a day off work, everyone. Homeschooling people, put that on. This is what your kids are doing for the day. This is crucial history that people need to understand.
Absolutely. And Polly, we're not just going to look at Simpsonwood. We're going to roll the clock back to 1975. Look at the last time, Dr. Hooker was talking about why aren't they pulling the COVID shot after 38,000 deaths reported to VAERS. The last time the CDC did the right thing over a vaccine causing deaths was in 1976 with the swine flu vaccine, which was pulled after 32 deaths and about 500 cases of paralysis. Fast forward to 1986, and the DPT vaccine was causing so many lawsuits that pharma lobbied, as we know, the Congress to get the total immunity from liability shield in the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. That was just sort of setting the stage for what happened at Simpsonwood. And only a few years after what happened at Simpsonwood, we had the MMR cover-up that we know about because of Dr. William Thompson and his conversations with Dr. Brian Hooker. 2011, the Brucewitz versus Wyeth ruled that you can't sue over vaccine design defects. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied here. And, then we've seen what's happened since. We've seen the debacle with HPV. We've seen the last, several years with the COVID vaccine. So, this is just a perfect encapsulation of what is wrong with our regulatory agencies. And I think that the timing couldn't be more appropriate. Please share this out, you guys, because there's a lot of people out there that do not understand why it is so critical that we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as our Secretary of HHS, getting in there and dismantling the system. I want to very quickly just share with you what you have on the lineup for the voices, the biggest voices in vaccine safety and medical freedom. We've brought in Barbara Lowe Fisher, Dr. Andrew Wakefield, Wayne Rohde, Dr. Brian Hooker, Cheryl Atkinson, Polly Tommy, Mary Holland, Mark Blaxell, Lynn Redwood, Beth Clay, John and Terry Poling. It's the first time they've spoken out in many, many, many years. So you won't want to miss that. Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. James Lyons-Weiler. We're going to have some video segments, archival footage, some heartbreaking tributes to families affected by vaccine related death and injury, and a memorial to the warriors that we've lost over the years. A special segment from our head of HHS. And why does this matter? This is about truth and transparency and accountability. Millions and millions of people have been gaslit, dismissed, and denied justice. We are going to show you what happened and what has been happening at the CDC, the intimate relationship that the CDC has and that FDA has with pharmaceutical industries. We're going to show you how the science was never settled. It was silenced.
Now, Tia, so people, you need to sign up for this. So we'll put the link in the show notes here. But if you go to, what is the link? Do you know, Tia? Lou?
I know if you go to CHD TV, there's a big banner on the very top of the page that scrolls through the current things that are going on, and it's right there.
Yeah, and we'll let you know when we're live. And if you don't want to sign up or you can't find the sign up form, I guess we're just live anyway on
show up on CHD TV. It'll be happening all day.
And the chat will be open all day as well, everyone. Well, Tia, Severino, thank you for all the work you've done. And, you know, it's really paid off because it's really important. It's history. So thank you, Tia.
Crucial information. Love you, Polly. See you soon.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, talking about vaccines and autism, this person, Ginger Taylor, in my mind, is the person who has the most knowledge on vaccines, which can and do cause autism. Let's bring her on. Ginger Taylor, good morning. Can you hear me? I think you might be muted. Yep.
Trouble.
There you go. We got you.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with my internet connection as well, so apologies if it's a little iffy.
Right. Well, sorry, Ginger, you are also a Christian author and writer as well, which I absolutely love. And you've been speaking out and writing and researching about vaccines, autism, health for years. I mean,
21.
Yeah. I used to meet Ginger at all the autism conference back in the day. So she's definitely been doing this a long time. Ginger, talk us through the truth here, because you've got this amazing website. What's it called? howdovaccinescauseautism.org. I really recommend that everybody gets that website, sends it to all those young mums. They can and do cause autism. We the parents are right. This did happen to our children.
Yeah, the way the website came about was in 2007, in the middle of the attacks on Andy Wakefield. We had an episode where 2004 Trump tried his career and end the question of whether or not vaccines cause autism by attacking him over it wasn't working, because he wasn't the only reason that people thought this. So they had a series of articles, and over the course of a week, they had used the phrase in a number of articles and a number of outlets that there is no evidence of any link between vaccines and autism. And about the 10th article I read that had that phrase in it, I finally understood what they meant by the Mockingbird media. And I got mad research, and I just went, I think it was 15 or studies that were in the back of David Kirby's book, Evidence of Harm, mercury preservatives and mercury in the air, and autism rates. And I put them up on my little mommy blog, Adventures in Autism. And I said, okay, you can't say that anymore. There is evidence of a link, and you may not think it's strong, and you may not have it in huge samples yet, but it's there. So that became the de facto place that people would go to reference the research on vaccines and autism. And over the years, more papers came out, and I would add them to the list, and I would find the old papers and I would add them to the list. And it kind of became a focal point for research. I education from a university that taught me how to read therapist, but I never wanted to be science nerd. This was not my calling. But it just kept proliferating. And around the time that the the COVID started, I had more than 100 papers there. It was even like 160 papers. And as we kind of shifted to deal with that, I thought, well, it's not if 160 papers aren't going to the media and medical establishment that there's a problem, I'm just going to leave it at that, because I need to go off and deal with the challenges that we were dealing with during that COVID era. And I went to look at it a couple years later, at the end of 2023. By the end of 22, we had the mainstream doctors who had come forward, like Peter McCullough, and were like, hey, you know what? The COVID vaccine is a problem. And these dyed-in-the-wool vaccine promoters suddenly, when they saw how this worked with the corruption behind the vaccine for COVID, suddenly started, and on Twitter, you know what, maybe the vaccine autism people had a point, and research is really needed, that people are paying attention again. So I went back. I had a backlog of all sorts of research to read. So I spent the early part of the year in 23 catching up on reviewing all the stuff that had, I just put into a pile. And I put up a website called howdovaccinescauseautism.org. And it has the opening of the website points out that the American Academy of Pediatrics still makes the false claim that there is no research linking the two. And they list 36 studies that they say disprove a link between vaccines and autism. Of course, they don't disprove it. All they do is fail to find an association, because they are designed to fail to find an association. And I put up the website, and it was over 200 papers by this point. And as of, there are now 236 papers to their 36 papers. So it is done. I've broken them down between, MMR, DTaP, all sorts of the aluminum links, the mercury links, the live virus links, the links between vaccines that have aborted fetal tissue and autism. And if you look kind of across the top, so if you want to learn about each vaccine and what the process is between the vaccine reaction and the autism development, you can really research that. On the right side of the menu, it's broken down by subtopics. So if you want to understand mitochondrial involvement in autism, you can click on it and find all the papers that discuss mitochondria, or interleukin 8, or aluminum adjuvants, or the immune system function. And there are a couple, and if you look at the top menu, there are papers that are just reviews that are going through the mechanisms, and you see doctor after doctor giving overviews of how the process works. There's a new one that I put up last night from Russell Blaylock, and he kind of creates a new term called immunoexcitotoxicity, talking about how aluminum becomes a vehicle for brain inflammation, and spells it out in terms that are a little bit more digestible for the public. So the point of the website is, first of all, to say, look, you guys are lying, and it's a stupid lie at this point. There's so much research, they're not giant samples because we don't have any money. The government controls all the money. So whatever their narrative it is, they're going to pay somebody to publish something that pushes that narrative, regardless of how silly it is, regardless of how easily it's taken apart, as Brian Deere did in this first segment today. It's really bad research, and anybody who takes an honest look at things, the research is in our favor, and they've stopped publishing things on the childhood vaccine schedule that they say debunk vaccine autism research. And it also makes the point that pretty loudly that this was not Andy Wakefield. This was not he did not start this. He did not come up with this theory. You know, the first paper on the website is published in 1943, and that's Lee O'Connor's first paper on autism, defining the term, and points out that the third case that he looked at was a vaccine case. It was a smallpox case where the child was vaccinated with smallpox, underwent a couple of weeks of gastrointestinal distress and diarrhea, seemed to recover from that, but then regressed into autism. So the idea that Andy Wakefield, who wasn't born yet, came up with the idea is silly, you know. And we have a paper in 1976 saying, well, vaccines don't cause autism, but they are the trigger. So they are the inciting factor. So this is an old discussion that they have tried to pretend that Andy invented. And it was done after the 1986 Act. And a lot of people don't know that the 1986 Act also mandated that NIH study the links between pertussis vaccine and autism. So the US Congress are the people that, you know, spread the word that vaccines could cause autism. And that was a decade before anybody ever heard of Andy Wakefield. So it's a great overview, and there's so much information there. I feel like when I talk about the research, I'm like the crazy guy with the pinboard in the back and all the red string trying to attach things because it's so complicated and there's so much research. So this was the best way I could find to present it for people who really wanted to drill down on it. And then also just the best way for anybody who, you know, there's a lot of, you can see the pathway that people take through the site, and a lot of people go to the front page, one study, two studies, and that's enough for them to go, oh, they really are lying. And they're unable to really drill down on all the research, but they can see that it's there. And then if you really want to understand, I think it's great for people who, you know, we've gotten back these lab results and I don't understand, you know, how this fits in, can sit down and go, okay, there's a result here on mitochondria, for example, dysfunction. How does that relate? And then they can read all the research for themselves and become comfortable with understanding and talking about their child's biological injuries. So this is, you know, I hope it will be a tool for people. I know that it's out there. Secretary Kennedy, when he became Secretary Kennedy, has a copy of it. So it's being looked at and being kind of poured through, which is amazing. So I feel like this is what I could do. You know, I didn't have a social life after Chandler got sick, so I'm not going anywhere. I got nothing better to do. Might as well stay home and read and do something constructive. And this is what it's turned out to be. And it was one of the things that I know Dr. McCullough, sent it to him right away when he started talking about that, and then responded really well. And then he ended up quoting it on an interview. So I know it's made its way into our new friends that came in from the COVID movement. So
as it should, it is amazing work. So how do vaccines cause autism.org? So push that on to everybody, especially those new mums, please. Ginger, you were telling me just before we went live that you have more information on the DTaP insert. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I did. I'm going to be writing about that this week. So subscribe to the Substack because this is coming. In March, when Bobby announced that he was going to do vaccine autism research and that he brought on David Geyer to help go through the data that he originally went through in the vaccine safety data link more than 20 years ago, Nightline called and wanted to do an interview. So, and I started turning mainstream interviews down years ago because they're pointless. And I thought, well, maybe I can just talk to the producer and convince her. There'll be no story, but you know, or if they have one, this won't get in it. I thought, sure, I'll do it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to record it because people should know how these interviews go and then what the finished product is. So I recorded the interview, and just a few minutes before she was supposed to call, I just looked up and I thought, oh, I wonder how much money ABC News is getting from Pfizer. So I did a search real quick, and there's a website that has a ticker of who the advertisers are for every network every week. And it turned out that ABC News's biggest advertiser on the week that closed the day before the interview was Sanofi. Now, Sanofi made the DTaP vaccine that gave my son brain injury. And I thought, well, this is fascinating. I wonder what they're advertising. So I looked up the drug, and it's called, oh gosh, Dupixent, hold on. Dupixent, maybe. And it's an injection for asthma and eczema, which are autoimmune disorders. And I'm like, oh, Sanofi caused my son's autoimmune disorder. I'm going to go back and read the package insert and see if it causes asthma or eczema. And found that on the Daptocel DTaP insert, there is information that they had asthma outcomes in the trials. So what Sanofi has done is, the problem reaction solution is you create a problem, you create an asthma market, and then you sell them the cure. And so by the time a child is 6 years old, he will have had 5 pertussis vaccines, if those are Daptocel. And asthma is an outcome starting at age 6. They can start buying this drug to have injected, I think, every month for the asthma that they may have caused. So it's like a tobacco company having a lung cancer cure. You create the market, and then you make money on both ends. So when I did the interview with the young producer, I gave the straight interview that I always give, the questions I always ask. And she was saying, well, I don't know that when this will air. And I said to her, it won't air, because your biggest advertiser right now is the company that gave my son brain damage. You're not going to bite the hand that is feeding you. Your model, it's stated different. It has said here, this isn't a glitch, it's a feature. Your business model is to so you are selling their asthma treatment. You will never criticize their vaccine that causes the need for the asthma treatment. And that's what pays your salary. And I nicely, but I gave her the whole, like, this is a giant corrupt circle, and you make your salary from it. So this will never air, and you're never going to say these things. And she kind of got quiet and then thanked me for my time. But the public, so I'm going to, they never ran the story, of course, and I told her she wouldn't. So the public, so I'm going to run that this week and just say, look, this is what every interview that any of us have given to mainstream media, they've got all the stories. They know they're selling the drugs of the enemy. They know that the injury is real. And I'll put up the emails I sent her proving all of the things. This site with the research, they all know. So them being like, well, why don't they understand that? They do understand. They are, if the content is free, are what they're selling. So ABC News, their product is not the journalism. Their product and their client is not the public. Their client is the drug companies that they're giving access to our eyeballs and our minds and their influence. So this is the business model that the media is staying alive on. And they can't, ABC News can't have, war journalists in a Moscow bureau unless they sell drugs. So it's, I think it'll be interesting. I'm going to put do some on old reports on journalism. What I'm looking at right now.
Ginger Taylor, thank you so much for all the work that you do. That's Ginger Taylor .substack. So everyone go over there, and I follow you on X. So pick where to follow. And that website that you've made is so important. And thank you for all the work you've done. All right. That's good. All right. Okay, everybody, I'm going to hand the show over now to the very capable Isabella Yon for Mothers to Be. So many of you have written in telling us how thrilled you are that we have this Mothers to Be segment. So we're delighted as well. And here's Isabella, and I'll see you all soon.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to our Mothers to Be segment where we chat all things preconception, pregnancy, birth, and first year. I am so excited to be joined today by Theo Farmer from Helios Farms. Theo actually played a big role in my 2 pregnancies with his amazing work on vitamin C. So thank you so much for being here today, Theo.
To be able to talk, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about particularly vitamin C in pregnancy, vitamin C in general. When I realized that my children had been damaged by the pharmaceutical industry in the 80s and 90s, and then by my 50s, learned the truth about vitamin C. It became a passion, and so this is wonderful to be on the show.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And for those of you who aren't familiar with you and the amazing work you do at Helios Farms, could you quickly just share a little bit about what you do out there?
Yes, we're a farm that provides food to our members. We're actually a ministry now. We founded the farm after learning about the pharmaceutical industry, and so we had the principles of no pharmaceuticals and no agricultural chemicals on the land. We have a centerpiece, which is the raw dairy. We recently started making cheese, which is, I think, when you start making natural cheeses, it is a very it's a very God-centered industry. It's been corrupted like everything else. All the cultures and cheese on the commercial cheese are GMO cultures. They use GMO in it, and we make cheese now with the natural processes. We also have a non-farm butchery, and we do everything in the private domain. So we've, over the last couple decades since we started this farm, we've really learned a lot about jurisdiction, and so we've structured our farm in a way that people can have access to super good food that doesn't use any we don't use any kind of pharmaceutical chemicals or agricultural chemicals. We use God's design. We follow God's design through all of our processes, and we work as a community to discern God's design, which means we're very scripture-based. So
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. We talk a lot about the importance of, consuming local farm products and really high quality products. So that's wonderful that you guys do that. And so what originally got you interested then in vitamin C, and specifically how vitamin C pertains and is so important in pregnancy?
Well, it was a slow awakening.
Okay.
Some people wake up really quickly, but I started high dosing vitamin C in the early 2000s. And realizing the health benefits of doing that, realizing that all this information was out there that really obsoleted the pharmaceutical industry. And so my first grandson, Helios, was born as a vitamin C baby. And I think that's the pivotal point in terms of my knowledge of vitamin C. And we kind of had this contrast of our children born in the pharmaceutical model, and then our grandson born in a bathtub at home because my daughter had high dose vitamin C. And so when Helios was born, it was I'd sold a company and was kind of consulting, and it was like, hey, how do we get this information out and in front of people? And yeah, I ended up writing this children's book, Buttercup Me and Vitamin C. And the reason that I presented this information in a children's book is because I felt like I should have known this information when I was like 5 years old. And and this book seemed like a really good way to present the information. I think I sent you a copy even before you were married, maybe, and or after you just got married. And I know that you read it and read it to your children. So I think this kind of awakening revelation has to be focused on the coming generations. At least there has to be a large focus on that. So if kids grow up knowing that they need to take vitamin C every day in much larger than the recommended doses by the government, then that's a really good thing. And so, the pregnancy protocol is super simple, I think, and that's why it is children's book material. And so what I always do is just say, hey, all you have to do is, grab a glass of water, take a teaspoon of ascorbic acid and dissolve it into water. That's 5 grams of vitamin C right there. You drink it down. It's tart, yeah, but it fuels your body in a way that matches what happens in other animals. So the book is called Buttercup Me and Vitamin C, and it's about it's really about how cows make vitamin C and humans don't make vitamin C, and it's done. And so the hope that I have is that a lot of children read this book and understand that, that's one of the differences humans have and one of the reasons we get sick is because we don't make vitamin C. We get sick. So it also, I think this information also is super important for parents as their children are born, understanding that they don't really need to vaccinate. That one of my early concepts was, hey, you can give your kids large doses of vitamin C just by mixing equal parts honey and equal parts ascorbic acid. So I had this post that went kind of viral on Facebook that was called vitamin C honey spoons. So I just blended some ascorbic acid into honey, and this is good for the women to eat it if they think it's too tart, and certainly for kids. We've solved lots of little like flu incidences. You give that to a child for several hours, and then all of a sudden the flu is gone. Any childhood disease, their body is super supported through the disease, so their immune system can get the full benefit of measles or mumps or all these things that the pharmaceutical has identified as a reason for a vaccine. None of those. Once you really understand vitamin C, you can support your child's immune system through those little events that are just natural parts of development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to several of the things you mentioned. First of all, your amazing book. I do still read that with my kids. And just like you said, it is so simple. I actually have my oldest child is 3 and he loves to read about Buttercup the cow. So it is a great children's book and it is educational, which is just so important. And then the honey spoons also are a big hit in our household.
Nice.
The kids think they taste absolutely delicious and are more than happy they're gladly take a honey spoon. So it is really wonderful. I'd love to loop back and talk a little bit about dosage in pregnancy and then also for the kids. How do people know how much to take? What actually is high dose, so to speak?
So in the 1940s, when this protocol was discovered and the doctor that was doing it had 300 consecutive uncomplicated births, which is unheard of nowadays. He had women walk in 300 in a row. They all had a baby in the hospital, and that's where the term vitamin C babies came from. His protocol was 5 grams in the first trimester. So that's what I put in this glass of water when I put a teaspoon of ascorbic acid in it. Drink that 5 grams during your first trimester, double that to 10 grams, 2 teaspoons in the second trimester, and then the third trimester is 15 grams. You know, that's thousands of times what the government recommends for women, pregnant women. They recommend 90 milligrams. And that's not nearly what a cow or goat makes to support their pregnancy. Cows and goats make hundreds of grams per day when they're pregnant, or at least a goat does. Cows make less. So we're trying to match in our bodies what the kind of mammal design for a robust pregnancy would be. And it's really about stress. Pregnancy is a stress on the human body, and vitamin C is like the stress relief agent. So, in mammals, they produce, you know, a calm day for a goat, they produce maybe 10 grams. When they're pregnant or when they're in heat, they're, you know, or when there's under some kind of stress, they can ramp that production up to like 100 to 150 grams. So that kind of variation is not taught in when people talk about supplementing vitamin C. When you get a cold, when you have a cold, you might need to take 100 grams, like 2 teaspoons an hour, and let your body absorb that. And then there's some point during the day where your cold or your allergy or, you know, all these oxidative stress things will just be neutralized by the vitamin C.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much. And what about sourcing? I know some people say whole food vitamin C, some people say ascorbic acid, some sodium ascorbate. What should we be taking? And are there any brands that you recommend also?
Yeah, so animals make ascorbic acid in their body, and so that's what you're trying to match. That is what vitamin C is there's so many myths because it obsoletes the pharmaceutical industry, at least a large part of it. There's so many myths that are propagated by just, you know, that the way that works, the media. Those concepts are the simple concept is animals convert glucose to ascorbic acid if you can get ascorbic acid in your body. But there are several ways to do that. Suzanne Humphries recommends sodium ascorbate, which is a salt that's of ascorbic acid. That works. Ascorbic acid is like the roots vitamin C, and then liposomal vitamin C is also good. We sell some that we get from Revitalize Wellness. I like their product and their testing procedures. And then I also, I mean, I don't know if we have time, but I really wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that there's some science recently that talks about olive leaf extract, and this supplement and this component of olive leaf extract is let's see, I can't really focus in on it, but this particular brand is what we're supplementing with. And there's some science. There's a cheaper brand, bulk supplements. I don't want to favor any particular brand, but basically supplementing with olive leaf extract that has this important component, which is called hydroxytyrosol, is a component that it seems like the early science shows that in our bodies that may help us either produce vitamin C like other mammals do, or it at least helps us recycle vitamin C. And there's probably going to be a link on this show to this paper by Dr. Levy, who's a good friend, and he really articulates the whole details about mammals and vitamin C, and also the restoration of the synthesis of vitamin C in humans. I think it's most important to really be prepared to supplement, similar to that protocol that we described, 5 grams, 10 grams, 15 grams, or bowel tolerance. And all this information is on my Substack. There's a article that I have called Vitamin C Babies, and I mean, that's something I think that, again, this information should be known by all pregnant women, because it's repeatable, it's provable, and it's just like one of the core things that you need to understand to build like the most robust baby and have the easiest birth. And there's so many members in our ministry, in our farm membership. Recently, we just had one born in March in a horse trough with her husband attending. We had one of our interns left the farm several years ago pregnant, and her and her husband started a farm back in North Carolina. She had a 12-pound baby boy. He delivered it. So we're really advocating that that women support their pregnancy with vitamin C, and then they go out in the woods and have their babies in a manger. So that's what we.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's funny, when I give birth, I have the urge always to just be alone, and I joke, but it's really valid. I joke that I would be perfectly happy just being on my own in the middle of the woods birthing my babies. It always just feels natural to me.
Yeah.
So I totally relate to that. I did just want to touch on, I'm sure some people out there watching this, perhaps newer to holistic health, wellness, might have some concerns about or have heard some myths about that high dose vitamin C or high dose anything during pregnancy may not be safe. Do you have anything that you could say to them?
I would have them talk to some cows because the cows high dose vitamin C through their pregnancies, goats, and I think they find it very safe. And most of our cows, their babies just fall out of them once their body is ripe. We talk about the importance of the body being ripe. I think a woman's body, basically, it's like the difference between if you're trying to, if you try to, if in the birthing industry, they try to stimulate the birth to happen early often. And with vitamin C, you can go a lot longer, I believe, and you give your body a chance to ripen so that your body becomes super flexible. And you see this with cows, their hips just kind of start expanding over a couple of weeks as the body ripens, and then the babies literally just like fall out. And so if you think of it, a difference between an unripe peach that you picked and you're trying to eat it, it's not very good. It's very rigid. And then there's the ripe peach. That's when the body's ready for birth. And that's different for every woman. So the 40-week thing, 42 weeks, that when you're high dosing vitamin C, that you just have to pay attention to when your tissues start relaxing and your body starts ripening. That's when the baby's getting ready to come out.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I like to always close with one final question, and that's if you have one piece of advice for a mother-to-be, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to learn everything about vitamin C and ignore vaccines completely. The vitamin C is going to be the way you protect from yourself and give yourself a good birth, and then your children, you're going to protect them from disease using your knowledge of vitamin C.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know we have your Substack here under your name. Is there anywhere else where you want to direct people to learn more about the work you do?
Well, the paper that hopefully you'll link to Thomas Levy's paper, but my Substack often links into orthomolecular.org. It's a body of health science that I think is ignored, and it shouldn't be. It's like the primary area where we learn about God's nutrients. So God designed these molecules, and so the more we know about them and how they impact our body, the better. My wife is studying a paper about vitamin B1 and how it's actually a cure for things like multiple sclerosis, nerve kind of issues. So a lot of those are a result of vitamin B1 deficiencies. Today, the environment is so toxic that we get depleted of certain nutrients, especially those like magnesium, vitamin C. Those are stress agents. So the more stress, if you don't supplement in higher doses than nature provides, you're not countering this assault on our body. And it is an assault. All the toxins, the radiation, those are all, I mean, you can prevent sunburn using high dose vitamin C, and it literally changes people's lives because they can go out and work outside for a lot longer, just high dosing vitamin C, and that's the thing that protects their skin. And so there's ways to prove, oh, this simple stuff works powerfully if you hit the right dose. And so that's yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Theo, and just sharing all of your wisdom with all of our mamas and mamas to be. And thank you guys so much for tuning into our segment. If you want to also learn more about the work we do at Mothers to Be, please follow us on social media. We're on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And now we are going to be moving on to our story of the day, which is Christopher Bunch's Gardasil story. Thanks.
And they came out and said that at this moment, Christopher is not responding to anything that we are trying. And he said, you know, we're pretty positive that the reason that this is happening is because of the HPV vaccination. Oh, Lord, he was vibrant. He was so smart, funny. We were taking them for their sports physicals for school. Somehow it got messed up. Our schedule got messed up at the doctor, and we ended up seeing a doctor that wasn't even the boy's pediatrician. And this was something that he was very persistent about, you know, this is something that he's going to do. You know, you wouldn't want your children to be the reason that some girl got, you know, their future wives or future girlfriends could get cancer. After that night, he slept for almost a full 48 hours before I really was like, okay, something is clearly wrong, like seriously wrong. So that's when 2 days after that is when I took him into the emergency room. When we got to the hospital, they did CAT scans, MRIs, they did the spinal tap, and basically they came back saying that Christopher had lesions on his brain, and that he had significant swelling in his brain and his spinal cord. Sent in a neurologist to speak with us, to where that is the first time that anybody had talked to us about, like, what prior to this had we done differently, like what was different. And he said, you know, we're pretty positive that the reason that this is happening is because of the HPV vaccination. And so they were diagnosing Christopher with ADEM, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. And then they said, we'll come in on the morning of the 14th and we'll do what we call a brain death test. And they came out and said that at this moment, Christopher is not responding to anything that we are trying. And he is not responding to the brain death test. It was showing that he was brain dead. Not only do we need to be researching this, but every single thing that goes to our body, every single thing, whether it's ingestion or injection. I think we need to be more self-aware and understand what we're doing to our bodies.
I'm gonna put him over here. Next to Christina there. There he goes. Look at his beautiful face.
Yeah.
All of these beautiful faces of these teenagers. It is disgusting. It is tragic, and it didn't need to be. And so, to all of you listening, we will not stop until we have got every single story.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.